All right, this is a little video on getting you started in R if you haven't used it much. I'm here on the Geospatial 570, 470 website, and you'll see there's a link for my website on R for spatial stats. This is a website I've created just to bring together some of the information that's a little bit harder to access on the web on how to use R for spatial stats. You'll see there's some information about R itself. RStudio is what I'll be using to talk to R because R is a command line program that is difficult to work with directly. I find it challenging. RStudio gives a whole bunch of features to us and a really nice interface and makes it just much faster to use and much more fun. This will talk about how to install R and RStudio. Let me know if you have any questions on that, since in this class we will have a lot of folks installing it on their local computers. It's also available, of course, in VLab. Okay, so I'm just going to walk through a little bit of this information. So I'm going to put that over there for now. So this is RStudio. It looks like a lot of other applications with file menu. And then when you first come into it, you won't have a script. Okay, you'll have the console, the environment, and plots. And there are other panels here, but these are the three that we'll be using the most. We'll also be using this R script panel quite a bit. I use this almost exclusively. So right now you can use R to do things like x equals 10. If I did that, you'll see up here in global environment, x is set to 10. Y equals 100. Whoops, I type on the right keys. Okay, z equals x times y. Hey, look, we've got a really complicated calculator now. You can also change those values and again say y equals x times y. Okay, and you can see them changing up here. This is one of the great things about RStudio is we get to see what's going on as we're programming. Now, if we were running R as a command line, this is all we'd have, just this one pane, and I would not like that. I really like writing stuff in the console or in RStudio in scripts, and that's what I do most of the time. So let's go ahead and write some code. And I am going to walk through the website because it's got a good flow and hopefully you guys like it. So just like we wrote x equals 10 down there, we can write it up here. I'm actually going to make it equal to 20, make that equal to that. And now what we can do is we can select those things and run them. Now notice that changed x and y, but it left z. Right? So one of the things you're going to want to do is you're going to want to regularly clear out your global environment. This will sort of clear out R's brain, and now you're back to nothing, which is where you want to be whenever you start. You don't want to leave things around. Also notice that you can either click on one line, hit run, and it will execute that line, and then go to the next line, hit run again, or you can select a block of code, hit run, and it will execute the whole thing. Now, the way we know that is by watching the console down here. Okay, so click on one line, ran x equals 20. Run again, y equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now you may have noticed me clearing that out. That's me hitting Control L. Control L, for some unknown reason, will clear out the console. Environment has this little broom. Plots, which we'll use in a little bit, also has a little broom. So it's Control L for the console. I recommend just making a note of that somewhere. Now again, we can do z equals x times y. We can run that, and now we see z down here. Okay, so there's a bunch of arithmetic that you can do. You can do square roots. Oh, have to run the whole thing. There we go. And now we can see what the square root of 20 is. There's log, and I won't go through many of these because there's a table on that website. And there are pretty common ones. Sine, cosine you might use. Log we will use quite a bit. Exponent we'll probably use. What we really want to talk about is R's array capability. So this is where R really shines. It's one of the reasons it's so popular is because it has a massive ability to handle arrays. In other words, if I do x equals 1 colon 20, you'll see over here what happened is we now have x int, it's an array 1 to 20, and you can't see the whole thing, which is a little bit annoying. Okay, it just gives you these dots. But if we do x all by itself and hit run, you will see the whole thing appear down here. Now, you can also do print x, okay, and that will print it, and that's more common for what you'll do. But just know that you can also just put the variable in. It's a quick way to print it out. Okay, we can see the whole thing goes from 1 to 20. Okay, so that's an array with values in it. Very easy, very fast to create these arrays inside of R, and they can be massive. Really doesn't care how big they are. Now when I go to print that, it's going to print a whole bunch of stuff. Oh, it's going to stop. Ran over. All right, so pretty fun. Now, once we have an array, what we can do is we can go in and we can get values out of it. So if I do x sub 1, you'll hear me say sub 1, that just means to index it by 1. So array sub 1, or x sub 1, that's going to go in and get the first value. Now, if you've done other programming language, notice that R uses 1 to get the first entry in the array. Other programming languages would use 0, but in R it's 1. Okay, and so this is how we can get out values from x. Now, notice that if we go to, let's see, I'm going to set this up with just 10 values, which will be a little bit easier to work with. And now if we go to 1, we get the first value. If we go to 10, we get the next one. Oh, cool. Alrighty. Now you can also pull out chunks of entries. So in other words, we can go ahead and say, x, I want to get the third entry, whoops, to the 7th entry. And the colon tells R that this is going to be the start and this is going to be the last. And again, notice it goes from 3 to 7. Okay, so it's actually going from 3 all the way to 7. All right, and that will pull values out. Now you can also replace values. So we can say x of 1 is equal to 1, 2, 3. And we run that. The first value changes from 1 to 1, 2, 3. So we can pull values in and put values, pull values out of and put values into arrays in R very easily and very fast. Again, there's more information on that. Now, here's where R starts to get really interesting, because now we can take the mean of x. In other words, we can take the average of an array by just saying mean x. We can find the sum, whoops, not the sum, the sum of x. Boom, cool. Okay, that will add up all the values within x. And there's a bunch of these functions we'll use quite a bit, but we're going to keep moving on. I know some of you have had this before. So another thing we can do is we can create sequences. Now if I create a sequence from -4 to, whoops, let me go ahead and run this. Okay, from -4 to 4 of length 200, that's going to go ahead and find 200 values going from -4 to +4. Let's go ahead and drop the number of values. This will be easier to see. There we go. So 20 values going from -4 to +4. That's a sequence. Okay, so that's another way of creating an array, which are also called sequences in R. Now another one that you will see very commonly used, especially on the web, is concatenate, or C. Okay, now what C does is it does create a new sequence. However, it's much more powerful, because what it actually does is it concatenates things together. So in other words, we could take x and we could make another array y. Okay, so now we have x, it's our original array, y, it's our next array, and now we can concatenate those using C into a new array, z. Whoops. Sometimes it stops like drawing things, so print works better. There you go. Whoops, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I did something wrong with y. Does it need the spaces? It does. Okay, learn new things all the time. All right, there we go. That's what I was hoping for. Now notice, originally y was integers. When we concatenate it with floating point values, it turned into a entirely floating point array. So R keeps everything consistent there. Let's see, we'll talk about some of these other things later. For right now, I do want to mention a couple things about writing scripts. One is you can do comments. Comments are very important, especially when you're starting to learn to program. You can just put them in by doing hashtag set x to a sequence. Whoops, to a, to a set of values. Let's call it a set. It's called a sequence. I call it an array. Let's call it an array. That's probably better terminology. Okay. Now anything after the hash will simply be ignored. R will just ignore it for you. You don't have to worry about it. One of the things I do recommend doing, particularly when you turn your scripts into me, is please put a header on them. Again, when you select this and run it, that will just be ignored. Doesn't have any effect on the code. One more thing I should mention is that when you run something, if it has an error, it will show up here in red. Now, unexpected symbol in X. That's pretty typical. What the heck does that mean? Especially if you have a large program, you make a small error, it's going to be like, what does that mean? Well, remember, you can run sections of your code. So I can run that section. Maybe the error's in here. Nope, it's not there. Aha. Now I've narrowed it down to where my error is. Now I can run that and go, okay, that's weird. I need to get it out of that plus thing, which you can do by number of means. I just hit dot or keys till it goes away. Okay, and now it's fixed. Now we run the whole thing. We don't get any red. We're good to go. Okay, so errors are pretty common. Vectors is what I should have called those. Yeah, that'd be a better term. All right, let's talk about vectors. So one of the big things with R is doing vector arithmetic, also known as linear algebra or matrix math. Please do not freak out about those numbers or those terms. It's just what we were talking about before. Here's a vector. It's just 12 numbers. And as I mentioned before, let's clean things out because things are getting messy. Okay, we run that. We get a vector, just another name for an array of numbers. There they are, 1 through 12. We can do the same thing using C or concatenate. Okay, there's another vector. An array, a sequence, a vector, those are all related. Now, sequence is a specific thing. It's creating a sequence of numbers with a defined interval between them. Concatenate is a specific thing. I call vectors arrays because I'm a programmer and that's what programmers call them. But they work exactly the same as I was just showing you with arrays. Okay? And I'm looking at that. Yes, there's some very cool things. We'll talk about matrices a little bit later and lists a little bit later. The most important thing for you right now is play with what I've just shown you. Go on the website, go through at least writing scripts. Again, play around. Don't feel like you have to understand everything, but feel like you're comfortable doing arithmetic and basic working with vectors, sequences, those things in R. It'll make your life much easier down the road.